Welcome to the Madison Motor Podcast special edition, and it is the NFL schedule show where I go through the NFL schedule and go over notable games, Sunday night games, Monday night games, Thursday night games, any special Saturday or Friday games on the schedule as well. So we'll just get right into it. Week 1, the opening game is the Texans at the Chiefs. And obviously it's Mahomes against Watson. That was the most intriguing matchup in terms of KC home games. So the Texans had to be the pick by default because obviously there was a division round game last year and they had the lead in that game, and then KC came back and won. So it makes sense. Plus the two young star quarterbacks drafted in the same year as well. So that's a good quarterback matchup for the NFL season opener with the reigning champs getting their rings. So notable games. We'll just do the entire week 1 because week 1's week 1. Seahawks at the Falcons. Obviously, those teams have met in the playoffs a couple of times over the past 8-9 years. Most notably recently in 2017 or the 2016 season. Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan, two of the better quarterbacks in the league. Eagles-Redskins, a division game. Dwayne Haskins, year 2. Carson Wentz, already year, I believe, 5 or 6. I want to say year 5. Yeah, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, this is year 5 for Carson Wentz already, which is crazy. So those two games are on Fox. CBS, the Dolphins at the Patriots. Obviously, Tua Tagovailoa and Jarrett Stidham, in all likelihood, or Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jarrett Stidham. We shall see there. Green Bay at Minnesota. So Aaron Rodgers against Kirk Cousins. That's a huge game. And I'm surprised that's on the 425 window, but we'll get to the 425 window game in a couple of minutes as I go through the week 1 schedule here. So NFC North, big game. Two quarterbacks that are polarizing for different reasons. CBS, Colts at the Jaguars, so division game there. Phillip Rivers' Colts debut against the team that's probably the favorites in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. On Fox at 1 o'clock, you have Bears at the Lions. So you got Nick Foles' Bears debut against Matt Stafford and the Lions. CBS, you have the Browns at the Ravens, so Baker against Lamar in the division. You have the Jets at the Bills, so Sam Darnold against Josh Allen in the division. The Las Vegas Raiders' first game will be at the Panthers and Teddy Bridgewater in Bridgewater's Panthers debut. The 4 o'clock window at 4:05 on CBS, you have the Chargers at the Bengals, so that could very well be Justin Herbert versus Joe Burrow in the opener, so that'd be pretty cool. Or it'll be Tyrod Taylor against Joe Burrow. And then 425, the Joe Buck Troy Aikman special. You have the Bucks at the Saints. Tom Brady versus Drew Brees, the best two teams in that division, at least on paper, headed into the season. And then you have the Cardinals at the 49ers, so a division rival there. Sunday Night Football, you got the Cowboys at the Rams and the Rams new stadium opener. And then on Monday Night Football doubleheader, you have the Steelers at the Giants. So two storied franchises. You have Ben Roethlisberger returning from injury against Daniel Jones, who is starting his second season. And then in the later window on Monday Night Football in week 1, you have the Titans at the Broncos. So the NFC runners-up against an up-and-coming Broncos team that is trying to get out of its little playoff sort of drought that they've had. And that's a team that's clearly trying to win now with some of the moves they made in the offseason. All right, so week number 2, obviously Thursday Night Football begins in week 2. And the first Thursday Night Football game of the season is the Bengals at the Browns on NFL Network. So Joe Burrow's first primetime game against Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham Jr., and the Browns. So the Browns have a tough one in week 1, then an easier one of week 2. So a lot of people are probably penciling in the Browns to start 1-1 to start the season. And then week 2, you have the Giants at the Bears on CBS. So that's Daniel Jones against Nick Foles. Jaguars Titans, that's normally a primetime game every year. So that's Gardner Minshew against Ryan Tannehill. You have Brady home opener against Teddy Bridgewater and the Panthers. Broncos Steelers. So you have Drew Lock against Ben Roethlisberger. So the Steelers in back-to-back weeks are playing against second-year quarterbacks. So that's a little bit of a break for them. Although the Broncos are an improved team, and the Giants did make some interesting moves in the offseason and have a new coach. So Steelers, many people on paper say, oh, easy 2-0, maybe not, who knows. And plus Ben Roethlisberger's on the downslope of his career rather than the upslope. You have the Rams at the Eagles, the Falcons at the Cowboys, the Lions at the Packers, Vikings Colts, so that's Rivers' home opener against Kirk Cousins and the Vikes. You have the Bills at the Dolphins, the Niners at the Jets, so the Niners going east. In the 4 o'clock window, you have the Redskins at the Cardinals, and 2 pretty good games on paper in terms of rosters. But I think the second game I'm going to list of these 2 is going to be the Nance Romo special on CBS. Chiefs Chargers. Maybe if Phil Rivers was still on the Chargers, that would still be a Nance Romo game. But I do think the Nance Romo game will end up being the Ravens at the Texans with the 2 young quarterbacks. Although the Chargers are opening up their new stadium against the Chiefs. So maybe that is the Nance Romo game. The reigning champs at the Chargers, or the Chargers opening their stadium. Because normally new stadium openings is a big deal for the NFL, and they like to get the lead announcers on there. Because I remember Buck and Aikman did the Rams home opener against the Seahawks the year that the Rams opened their new stadium in Los Angeles when they moved. And then Sunday Night Football is the Patriots at the Seahawks. Maybe if that was a later season game, that's a flex candidate if that was later in the year, but it's not, unfortunately. So the Patriots at the Seahawks, that has blowout written all over it, but you never know. And then the Raiders Vegas opener against the Saints at home. So that is a pretty entertaining week too. So the rest of the schedule, I'm just going to do Thursday night, the 4:25 game, any notable 1 o'clock games, division game, whatever, and then Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. So week 3, Thursday Night Football, you got the Dolphins at the Jaguars. That's probably the worst game that's on primetime this year. The worst team in the league against the team that a lot of people thought was the worst team in the league last year, but they wound up getting the 5th pick in the draft rather than the 1st pick. A couple other games of note. The Niners back-to-back weeks on the East Coast. They play the Giants after playing the Jets. Texans Steelers, so you got Watson against Big Ben. Joe Burrow on the road at Philly. That's not easy for him. You have the Rams at the Bills. Obviously, the Bills are up and coming. The Rams looked like that up and coming team, but not so fast. You have the Cowboys at the Seahawks for the Joe Buck Troy Aikman special. Those 2 teams really haven't met up in the regular season in a while. That's normally a playoff game because they met in the playoffs a few years ago and the Cowboys won. And then, obviously, they met in the postseason with Tony Romo when he was in his first year, and then the fumbled snap on a Saturday night, and everybody remembers that. And Seattle got that win in the playoffs. And then the Bucks at the Broncos probably would have been a Joe Buck Troy Aikman game had that been another week, but Buck and Aikman are the Cowboys rating machine, and they're going to put them with the rating machine Cowboys, so that sucks for that matchup. They'll probably get Kevin Burkhardt or Kenny Albert or somebody else that's pretty good for that game, although that game deserves more recognition. So that was a big loser in terms of being overshadowed type of game. And then Sunday Night Football is the Packers at the Saints, so Aaron Rodgers against Drew Brees. Monday Night Football, the sexiest quarterback matchup of the season. And for the third straight year, Patrick Mahomes against Lamar Jackson, except this time in Baltimore. The last 2 years that game was in Kansas City, and the Chiefs won both of those games. So now Lamar faces the Chiefs at home, and that should be a really, really good Monday night game. So ESPN got a couple good games right off the bat, especially that one. Week 4, Thursday Night Football is the Broncos at the Jets. So Drew Lock against Sam Darnold, 2 young quarterbacks, one in year 2, the other in year 3. The Broncos are probably the better team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And they improve themselves offensively as well. In terms of other notable games, and that game's on NFL Network, by the way. You got the Buccaneers hosting the Chargers. That would have been a more fun game if Phillip Rivers was the Chargers quarterback instead of Tyrod Taylor. That's just facts because obviously Brady and Rivers have had a lot of battles throughout the years. An in-state rival, the Ravens at the Redskins. The Jags at the Bengals with Minshew against Burrow. So that might be Burrow's first win. You have the Colts at the Bears, so Phillip Rivers against Nick Foles. So 2 solid rosters with quarterback questions a little bit. You got the Texans hosting the Vikings. So Kirk Cousins against Deshaun Watson, a battle of 2 teams that have been making the playoffs a lot over the last few years. You have the Steelers at the Titans, so Big Ben against the Titans. And then the Dance Romo game will be the Patriots at the Chiefs. So rematch of the AFC title game from a few years ago, although to me it's really not a rematch because Tom Brady's gone. It's like when the Cavaliers played the Warriors the year after LeBron left. That was not a real rematch because the star player was gone. That's not a rematch anymore because Tom Brady is gone. And don't tell me that Lakers Warriors, or in the NFL's case, Bucks Chiefs is a rematch of the AFC title game because of the star player, because it's not. So neither of them are really rematches. So it's like a fake rematch in a weird way. And then Sunday Night Football is a good one between the Eagles and the 49ers. Monday Night Football, good quarterback matchup. Matt Ryan against Aaron Rodgers. Week 5, Thursday Night Football, you got the Buccaneers at the Bears. So Tom Brady facing a good defense to start off Week 5. You have the Eagles at the Steelers in an in-state showdown. You have the Cardinals at the Jets, so 2 young quarterbacks going at it there with Kyler Murray and Sam Darnold. You have Joe Burrow against Lamar for the first time that week. You got the Raiders at the Chiefs. The Broncos at the Patriots. That isn't a big deal anymore because Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are no longer on those football teams. But that game used to be a big deal 5 years ago, and now it's not. The 425 Jim Nantz Tony Romo special, Giants at Cowboys. To me, one of the biggest surprises of the season is that Giants-Cowboys is a CBS 425 game rather than a Fox one, and that is because it's normally a lock every year that Buck and Aikman get a Giant-Cowboy game, and the other one is either on ESPN or on NBC with Michaels and Collinsworth, or the people from ESPN. Right now it's Booger McFarland and Joe Tessitore, but no. Jim Nantz and Tony Romo are getting a Giant Cowboy game. That's different for them. And Nance has called a lot of big Giant and Cowboy games over the past decade when Eli Manning and Tony Romo are their quarterbacks, and now he gets them with Daniel Jones and Dak Prescott, although he's called a couple of Prescott games, and I don't think he's had Daniel Jones yet. So that should be interesting for Jim Nance. And it's funny because on the schedule show last night, they had on the trifecta of Joe Buck, Jim Nance, and Al Michaels, and Jim Nance made a comment about the crossover flex game for the Giants-Cowboys being on CBS, and he goes, "Thank you very much." So a little bit of smack talking for Jim Nance on the schedule release show. And then Colts at the Browns is also a 4:25 CBS game that week as well. And then Sunday Night Football is Vikings at the Seahawks. The ironic thing about that matchup is that the last 2 years, Vikings at Seahawks was a Monday night game. And now this year, it's a Sunday night game. So 3 straight years where the Vikings go to Seattle. And I think that's just scheduling coincidence, because you see that a lot when the same team goes to the same stadium 3 straight years. I remember the Packers went at the Giants 3 years in a row at one point as well. So now we see it here with the Vikings going to Seattle 3 straight years. But that's just a weird scheduling quirk with conference teams that are not in the same division. And in Monday Night Football, the Chargers at the Saints. So Drew Brees against the team that drafted him. And probably his last game against the Chargers too. So that makes sense for those reasons. So maybe Justin Herbert on Monday Night Football. Week 6, the Thursday night game is the Chiefs at the Bills. So Patrick Mahomes against Josh Allen. And everyone, I bet, will pick the Bills in that game because normally Thursday night games are very weird. But you never know. You got the Vikings hosting the Falcons, so a good quarterback matchup between Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins. You have 2 bad teams, maybe a tank for Trevor Bowl between the Lions and the Jaguars that week. Redskins-Giants, the battle of 2 young quarterbacks in Dwayne Haskins and Daniel Jones in year 2 in the same division. Ravens-Eagles is a very good game that week on 1 o'clock on CBS. So that's probably Jim Nance and Tony Romo because Buck and Aikman have the 4:25 game. So you could bet your house that Nance and Romo will be in Philadelphia for Ravens-Eagles with Lamar and Carson Wentz. You have the Texans at the Titans. So the top 2 teams from that division last year go at it. Browns at the Steelers, 2 teams that are looking to bounce back from disappointing years last year. 4 o'clock window, you have the Dolphins at the Broncos. So Tua at Drew Lock. And then the Joe Buck Aikman special at 4:25, Green Bay at Tampa. So Aaron Rodgers against Tom Brady. And then Sunday Night Football, you have the Rams at the 49ers. So division rival there. And in Monday Night Football, you have Kyler Murray and the Cardinals against Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. That's a good one in terms of young quarterbacks and a little bit of intrigue. DeAndre Hopkins back in Texas, but he's playing the Cowboys, not the Texans. Week 7, the Thursday night game is the Giants at the Eagles. So Daniel Jones, his first game in Philadelphia. Don't forget last year, Eli Manning played in the game in Philadelphia as Jones had the injury that he sat a couple weeks. So this was Jones' first game at Philadelphia. And then you have the Steelers at the Ravens, so that very solid division game there. You can bet your house that that's going to be Ian Eagle and whomever. Oh, Charles Davis. I was about to say whomever his partner is, but no, Charles Davis is Ian Eagle's new partner. So you could bank your house that that's going to be their game because the 4:25 game is Nance and Romo, which we'll get to. You got the Bengals hosting the Browns, so Burrow against the Browns round 2. You have the Cowboys at the Redskins in a division game. You have the Bills at the Jets for the second time. You have, in the 4 o'clock window, Seahawks at the Cardinals. So Kyler against Russell Wilson. And in the 4:25 window, you have 2 games. The game that should be the Nance Romo game is Chiefs at the Broncos with Mahomes going to Denver. He got hurt in Denver last year. And then Drew Lock again in his first game against the Chiefs. And then our first home game against the Chiefs. I think he did play against the Chiefs last year. And then the 49ers at the Patriots is probably going to be the Vance Romo game, although it shouldn't because Tom Brady is no longer a Patriot. But why is that game intriguing? Because it's Jimmy Garoppolo's return to New England. So that's why that game's a big deal. So I wonder what kind of reception he'd get there. So that's one of the popular return games of the season. There's another one later in the season that we'll touch on. And then Sunday Night Football, the Bucs at the Raiders. One of my big takeaways, the Oakland Raiders belong nowhere near Sunday Night Football. Like, there's teams like the Minnesota Vikings that got less primetime games than the Raiders, then they should be on Sunday Night Football more than a team that might finish last place in its division in the Raiders. And I get the Vegas thing. Like, I don't mind their home opener being on national TV, and I don't mind them getting an extra Monday night game or a Thursday night game against a division rival like the Chiefs or Denver. But they do not belong on Sunday Night Football. I get it, Brady in Vegas, but put that at 425 or put that on even Thursday Night Football. But that's just nuts that the Raiders got 2 Sunday Night Football home games. We'll get to the other one in a little bit. It's a division game that we'll get to for them. But, yeah, that's a little rant that I disagree with the Raiders because they are the worst team other than the Patriots that are on Sunday Night Football this season. And then Monday Night Football for week number 7 is the Bears at the Rams. That was a primetime game last year where the Bears won, and that was a primetime game 2 years ago, except in Chicago, where the Bears won as well, and that was a game that a lot of people left some doubt for the Rams for a couple of years ago. So 3 straight years of those two teams being in primetime, except 2 years ago's game was in Chicago rather than Los Angeles. So week 8 we move on to now. Thursday Night Football, you have the Falcons at the Panthers, so that's not one of the better Thursday night games of the season. So Bridgewater against Matt Ryan. The rest of the games for week 8, or the rest of the notable games for week 8, you have Vikings-Packers again. I'm disappointed that one of those games isn't in prime time because that's a good game. That's the best 2 teams in the division, arguably, unless you think that the Bears are in that top 3. But 2 of the best 3 teams in that division is the safe way to say that. And then you have the Raiders at the Browns, so Derek Carr against Baker Mayfield. Patriots at the Bills. You got Sam Darnold at Patrick Mahomes with Jets-Chiefs. The Joe Buck-Troy Aikman game will be San Francisco at Seattle. So, obviously, 2 of the better teams in that division. Probably the 2 best teams in that division. And then Saints-Bears is also in the 425 window as well. Sunday night, you have the Cowboys at the Eagles that week. So, huge NFC East game. And then Monday Night Football, you have the Bucs at the Giants, and that's intriguing because Tom Brady lost 2 Super Bowls to the Giants, even though it's not Eli Manning anymore, it's Daniel Jones. But the other intriguing thing about this matchup is that it's Joe Judge against Tom Brady, and obviously Joe Judge was the special teams coach on the Patriots all those years that Tom Brady was there. So that's that connection, or some of those years, not all those years. So that's that connection with Brady and Joe Judge that makes that game somewhat enticing. Week 9, Thursday Night Football, you have the Packers at the 49ers, so the NFC title rematch from last year. I had this pegged as a Saturday night game, but we don't know what the Saturday games are going to be. There's a lot of TBDs in the schedule late in the year, so maybe they'll put those games on Saturdays. So the Packers at the Niners, NFC title game rematch. You figured that would be on national TV. I just got the wrong date for that. And that's a Fox game on Thursday Night Football, which Fox begins, I believe, week number 5 for Thursday Night Football, as the NFL Network has all the games that are on Thursday nights, with the exception of week 1 and Thanksgiving, because those games are on NBC. So, Seahawks at the Bills is in week 9. So obviously, two playoff teams from last year. The Ravens at the Colts. So that is Phillip Rivers hosting Lamar Jackson. You have the Broncos at the Falcons. You have the Giants at the Redskins again. So the two young second-year quarterbacks face off for the second time. You got the Raiders at the Chargers. So Justin Herbert maybe against Derek Carr. And then the Nance Romo game, Steelers-Cowboys. So Ben Roethlisberger against Dak Prescott. Obviously, this is a rematch of a game. 4 years ago, that was an all-time classic of a game that the Cowboys pulled the rabbit out of their hat in. Ezekiel Elliott scored the go-ahead touchdown moments after Big Ben did the Marino spike fake and threw it to Antonio Brown for the go-ahead touchdown. And that was one of the better games of the 2016 season. So when I do my top 10 NFL games of 2016, not next week but the following week, that game for certain will be on there. So that's a rematch of that game. And then Sunday night game is the Saints at the Bucs for the second time this season. So Breeze at Brady. And then Monday Night Football, you have the Patriots at the Jets. And that's probably one of the worst Monday Night Football games of the season, assuming that the Patriots are not going to be the Patriots of old. And the Jets, they're still the Jets. There's no other way to say it. So Week 10, although I do think the Jets may be a little improved. So Week 10, Thursday Night Football, you have the Colts at the Titans, two of the three best teams in that division going at it. Ryan Tannehill against Phil Rivers. And then the Sunday slate, you have the Eagles at the Giants for the second time that season. The Bengals at the Steelers, so Burrow at Pittsburgh for the first time. You got the Texans at the Browns, so Deshaun Watson at Baker Mayfield. You have a good quarterback matchup in the 4 o'clock window, Bills at the Cardinals, so Josh Allen against Kyler Murray. The Joe Buck Troy Aikman special will be the Niners at the Saints, a rematch of a classic regular season game from last year in which George Kittle made a big catch on 4th down, and then Robbie Gould kicked the game-winning field goal for the Niners to earn themselves a big-time road win in that game. Seahawks-Rams is also in that 4 o'clock window as well on Fox, but that's not going to be the Buck Aikman game. Niners-Saints will be. And that Niners-Saints game last year was not Buck and Aikman. It was Kevin Burkhardt and Charles Davis last year. So at least Buck and Aikman get that game this season. And then Sunday Night Football, the Ravens at the Patriots. I think that's a flex candidate, by the way. The Patriots might be out of it by then. Let's say that's a flex. Then what do they put in? I think that either Texans-Browns or maybe Bills-Cardinals will be the Sunday night game in that spot instead of Ravens-Patriots, assuming that, like I said, the Patriots are not the Patriots anymore. So I think one of those two games I just mentioned is going to be in that Sunday night window instead of the Ravens-Patriots, and that game will be moved to 1 o'clock. And then Monday Night Football, you have the Vikings at the Bears. So that's a good one. Two of the best three teams in the NFC North. Kirk Cousins against Nick Foles. A good defense against an offense that has seen some turnover a little bit with Stephon Diggs out and Justin Jefferson in. So that should be a good game. Obviously, that this was a Monday night game on Halloween back, I believe it was 2016. And the Vikings, I believe, were undefeated at the time. And that was their first loss at the Bears. And everyone and their brother had the Vikings in the survivor pool. And the Bears only had like 1 or 2 wins at the time. And then the Bears and Jay Cutler wound up with the win that week. That was back in 2000. I believe it was 16. And I believe it was on Halloween, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So week 11. Cardinals-Seahawks is the Thursday night game. That's a good game. That's going to be a good game at that point of the season. Kyler Murray against Russell Wilson. And don't forget, the Cardinals beat the Seahawks last year in Seattle without Kyler Murray, although that was a day game rather than a night game. And that, I think, was one of the more bad losses of Pete Carroll's career, because you lose the Kyler Murray-less Arizona Cardinals at home. That's like a disaster. And that team still wound up making the playoffs last year and lost to the Packers in the division round. So Kyler Murray in Seattle should be fun. And then the rest of the notable games, you have the Patriots at the Texans, not as enticing as it would have been if Brady was there. Veteran quarterback matchup between Aaron Rodgers and Phil Rivers as the Colts host the Packers. You have the Titans at the Ravens, a rematch of the AFC divisional round game from last year. You have the Falcons at the Saints, so Matt Ryan, Drew Brees. The Joe Buck Aikman special. Vikings hosting the Cowboys, so the Vikings do get a little bit of a spotlight game here against America's team. That was a primetime matchup last year that Dallas hosted on Sunday Night Football, and Kirk Cousins and the Vikings went in there and won. And then that was a primetime matchup in Minnesota, I believe in the 2016 season, when Dak and Zeke were rookies, and the Cowboys went into Minnesota and won, as Minnesota kept that game competitive. And then Sunday Night Football, Chiefs at the Raiders. Like I said, that should have been probably a Thursday night game, not a Sunday night game. The Raiders are not good. Why are they on Sunday Night Football? I get the Vegas allure, but it's not fair. There's good teams that were robbed of appearances on Sunday Night Football because the Raiders had to take up two of their spots. And I'm looking at teams like the Vikings and teams like the Texans, who have a star quarterback in Deshaun Watson. But the team's not that good, but Deshaun Watson's still awesome. Who's awesome on the Raiders? Josh Jacobs isn't awesome like Deshaun Watson awesome, or Christian McCaffrey awesome, or even Saquon Barkley awesome. Come on. I've had enough of the Raiders. That game's going to be flexed out too, I think. And the game I think could very well be in that spot at the end of the season, or towards the end of the season. I'm going to say the game that ends up in that spot is the Colts that are hosting the Packers. I think that the Colts will get a couple primetime games at the end of the season, because I think that they're going to be very good. And obviously it's Aaron Rodgers on the other side. And we all know NBC's affinity for Aaron Rodgers. And in Monday night game, you have the Rams at the Bucs. So Tom Brady against Jared Goff and the Rams. Week 12, Thanksgiving. You have the Texans at the Lions. What's intriguing about that game is that this was the Thanksgiving game 8 years ago, where that famous brawl broke out that Jim Schwartz, the ex-Lions coach, was involved in. It was a classic game that the Texans won. I believe they won on a field goal in overtime. And then Jim Schwartz was just bitching at the refs about a bad call, and it was a big deal. And it's a rematch of that game in a weird way, even though the Texans have a different quarterback now, Deshaun Watson, not Matt Schaub, and Matthew Stafford is still there. So it's kind of a rematch, but at the same time it's not really a rematch, because both of those teams have different head coaches now. The Texans with Bill O'Brien and the Lions with Matt Patricia. But that's just funny, because that was obviously the Thanksgiving game 8 years ago, and that fight broke out at the end of that game involving Jim Schwartz. And in the 4:30 game on Fox, Buck and Aikman's game, Redskins at the Cowboys. Feels like every other year that the Cowboys get a division opponent for Thanksgiving, and it's normally either the Eagles or the Redskins. And the irony is that the Redskins don't have a primetime game this year. Neither does Detroit. And I'm surprised that neither of those teams do. I thought for sure that the Redskins would get at least a Monday night game, because Chase Young is on the Redskins now, and they have a young quarterback in Dwayne Haskins that people expect to improve. So I think that they got robbed a little bit of a primetime game, at least one. And the Lions are not very good, we know, but normally they get a couple primetime games as well. So it's disappointing that those two teams didn't get primetime games this year. So Redskins at the Cowboys. So Chase Young and Dwayne Haskins against Prescott and those boys in Dallas. And then the Thanksgiving night game is a great game. You have the Ravens at the Steelers. That could be big for the division with Ben Roethlisberger and Lamar Jackson. So a great choice by NBC to put one of the best division rivalries in the league on Thanksgiving. And then the Sunday games, you got the Giants at the Bengals, so Daniel Jones at Joe Burrow. Titans at the Colts, I talked about a couple of weeks ago in the schedule, while we were previewing the schedule on the show, that was two of the best three teams in the division. So that could be a good game. Dolphins at the Jets, so Tua in New York for the first time, assuming it's him. You have the Cardinals at the Patriots, so Kyler Murray at New England and Belichick. Saints-Broncos is in the 4 o'clock window, so you have Drew Brees in a tough road game at Denver. You have the Niners at the Rams, but the Nance Romo special, you got the Chiefs at the Bucks. So Mahomes against Brady, so that is a huge game, obviously. And then the Sunday night game is the Bears at the Packers. That was the opener last year, except it was at the Bears, and the Packers came away with I believe it was like a 10-7 win. It was some crazy score like that they won. And then the Monday nighter is Seattle at the Eagles, so Russell Wilson at Carson Wentz. So that is a solid Monday night game. So week 13 is the last week of byes. A fantastic Thursday night game, arguably the best Thursday night game of the season. Dallas at Baltimore. So Dak Prescott at Lamar Jackson, two MVP candidates going into the season. So it should be a great, great game down there in Baltimore. You have the Saints at the Falcons, so Ryan against Breeze again. You got the Colts at the Texans, so Phil Rivers at Deshaun Watson. You got, in the Nance Romo special, a cross flex game. So they get an NFC game between the Eagles and the Packers. So Nance and Romo get Eagles-Packers. And last year, Eagles-Packers was a Thursday night game where the Eagles came away with a narrow win. And that was Green Bay's first loss of the season that year. And then Sunday Night Football, you got the Broncos at the Chiefs. Good for the Broncos getting a Sunday night game. They probably deserved an extra one and not the Raiders, to be quite frank. Like, if the Broncos had 2 Sunday Night Football games instead of the Raiders, I would have been completely fine with it, because the Broncos are an up-and-coming team that I think could make the playoffs this season and is an absolute dark horse, perhaps, to win the AFC if things were to break right for them. So good job for the Broncos to get a Sunday night game. And what sucks for them is that they have to go on the road. I'd rather see 2 Bronco home games on Sunday Night Football than 2 Raider home games. Or even 1 Broncos game rather than 2 Raider home games. Because I don't think the Raiders are going to be any good. And I think that the Broncos have a chance to be really, really good if things were to break right and Drew Lock makes a leap. And then Monday Night Football, you have the Bills at the 49ers. So Jimmy Garoppolo against Josh Allen. 2 good defenses. So that should be a fun game between 2 contenders on Monday Night Football. So a couple good Monday Night Football games this season, including that one. Week 14, you got the Patriots at the Rams, so that's not a good Thursday night game. Both of those teams could very well be out of it by then. You have the Vikings at the Bucks. That should be a primetime game, by the way. So Kirk Cousins against Tom Brady, 2 good teams at it there. You have the Chiefs at the Dolphins, so Tua against Mahomes. You have the Cowboys at the Bengals, so Joe Burrow's first game against the Cowboys. You have the Cardinals at the Giants, so Kyler Murray at Daniel Jones, round 2. Kyler Murray came away with the win in round 1 last season. You have, in the Joe Buck Trey Aikman special, You have the Saints at the Eagles, so that's a good game. Drew Brees and the Saints against Carson Wentz and the Eagles. Sunday night game is the Steelers at the Bills. I initially had that game penciled in for a Sunday night game, but I think I had it as a Monday night game. So, hard road game for Pittsburgh. And that game actually was on Sunday Night Football last year. The Bills came away with the big win at Pittsburgh. And in Monday Night Football, you have the Ravens at the Browns for the second time this season. So, Lamar at Baker Mayfield in prime time. Week 15. Thursday Night Football, the Chargers at the Raiders. Like, that's fine. Like, having a Raider home game on Thursday Night Football is fine, or Monday Night Football, but not Sunday Night Football. They're not good for Sunday Night Football. I mean, the Chargers wouldn't have dumbfounded me if they were on Sunday Night Football, even though it's unknown about their quarterback and it's unknown about Justin Herbert. But that's a good roster. Like, I would have been okay with the Chargers on one Sunday Night Football game. But yeah, Chargers at the Raiders, like, that's fine. A division game on Thursday Night Football. And then you have the Browns at the Giants. So that's obviously Odell Beckham's return to MetLife Stadium against his former team. He did play in MetLife Stadium last year, but that was against the Jets, and he had that big touchdown. And I remember everybody and their brother was acting like they were playing against the Giants. No, they were playing against the Jets, not the Giants. So this is a huge game for Odell Beckham Jr. and the Browns. At the Giants, Giants will probably be out of it by then. Browns will be playing for perhaps a wild card at that point. Big division game between the Bears and the Vikings that week as well. Bucks at the Falcons, so Brady at Matt Ryan. You got the Patriots at the Dolphins. Obviously, Tua against New England. New England's going to be out of it by then, probably. You have the Eagles at the Cardinals. That's a sneaky good game. Carson Wentz at Kyler Murray. And then the Nance Romo special, you got the Chiefs at the Saints. So Mahomes against Breeze. That would be fun. Sunday Night Football, San Fran at Dallas. So that could potentially be for the 1 seed. So that's pretty enticing. And then Monday Night Football, you have the Steelers at the Bengals. So Joe Burrow on Monday Night Football against division rival. Week 16, you have a Christmas Day game, which is a Friday, 4:30 on Fox. And I think they're doing this during the late afternoon so they can avoid the NBA Christmas window because they know something. Let's face it, the NFL knows it, that the NBA is in all likelihood opening their 2020-2021 season on Christmas. So that's why they decided to put this Vikings-Saints game in the 4:30 window. So the ABC primetime game at 8 o'clock wouldn't affect the ratings with that. So they'd be going up against the 5 o'clock ABC NBA Christmas game. That'll probably be the Mark Joe and T.B. Brown special. And Joe Buck and Troy Aikman won't have to go up against Mike Breen, Mark Jackson, and Jeff Van Gundy in the NBA in the ratings in the NBA's biggest game on Christmas Day. Whatever that matchup will be, we have no idea, obviously. Maybe Lakers-Clippers again, who knows. But anyway, that's a nice matchup for Christmas. 2 teams that could also be potentially for playoff seeding as well. 2 teams that obviously could win their divisions. Are likely, one of them I think is very likely to win the division. The other one I think is somewhat likely to win its division. So that is a nice game for Christmas Day. And in terms of the other games for Week 16, you got the Colts at the Steelers, so Rivers against Roethlisberger. You have the Browns at the Jets for the second straight year, so the Browns, like the 49ers, play the Giants and the Jets in MetLife Stadium back-to-back weeks. You have the Giants at the Ravens, so Daniel Jones at Lamar Jackson. You have the Bengals at the Texans, so Joe Burrow at Deshaun Watson. 4 o'clock window, you have the Rams at the Seahawks, but probably one of the biggest games of the entire NFL season, 4:25 on Fox. Joe Buck, Troy Aikman will be on the call. Eagles, Cowboys, that'll probably be for the NFC East in all likelihood. And Dallas gets that game at home this year. Obviously, week 16 last year, Dallas at Philadelphia was the 4:25 on Fox Buck Aikman special. And that was the pretty much the NFC East determining game where the Eagles wound up winning the division over the Cowboys. And then Sunday Night Football is the Titans at the Packers. I'm going to make a prediction. That game's flexed out because I don't think those two teams may be in it. Maybe one of them will and the other won't, but something tells me one of these teams may be picking in the top 7 of the draft and the other one is probably going to be battling for a wild card. But I know Aaron Rodgers, they have an affinity for him. But if I had to predict a game that gets flexed into that spot, could very well be the 49ers at the Cardinals. I'm looking at that game hard. I won't be shocked if the Cardinals are closer to the playoffs than one of those teams are, and the Niners are battling for either their division with Seattle or even Arizona if Arizona surprises, or they're battling for seeding with teams in the conference. So I won't be shocked if that's a Sunday night game rather than this Titans-Packers game, which I think both of those teams could be disappointments this upcoming season. And in Monday Night Football, the last Monday Night Football of the season will be the Bills at the Patriots. So the Patriots probably be out of it by then. And who knows, maybe the Bills will have the AFC East clinched by then. And that'd be fitting if the AFC East isn't clinched yet and the Bills went into New England and won that game to clinch the AFC East. That'd be pretty cool. Bills clinch at Belichick to end the Patriots division streak that they currently hold that is bound to snap this season. And obviously the Bills at the Patriots was not a primetime game last year, but it was a Saturday game last year. It was a good game that the Tom Brady and the Patriots wound up pulling out of their asses to win the AFC East over the Bills. And in week 17, as it is every year, it's all division games. You got the Dolphins at the Bills, the Saints at the Panthers, the Jaguars at the Colts, the Titans at the Texans, the Packers at the Bears, the Bengals host the Ravens, the Steelers are at the Browns, the Vikings at the Lions, the Chargers at the Chiefs, the Jets at the Patriots, the Cowboys at the Giants, which I think is going to end up being the Joe Buck Troy Aikman game if the NFC East isn't clinched yet, because that was the case last year where the NFC East wasn't officially clinched yet, and they did the Redskins-Cowboys game. And I believe it was Kevin Burkhardt and Charles Davis that did the Giants-Eagles game, if I'm not mistaken. So the Redskins are at the Eagles. The Falcons at the Bucks. The Raiders at the Broncos. The Cardinals at the Rams. And then the Niners host the Seahawks. Most likely to be the flex in the Sunday night. I think it could very well be Seattle at San Francisco for the second consecutive year. I think that'd be really cool. Obviously, that was a classic last year where the 49ers made a big stop on fourth down to prevent the Seahawks from winning the division. Well, and they wound up winning the division that night, the Niners, and wound up being the 1 seed. That was a crazy game where the Seahawks came back and made that game very, very interesting. And if it's not that game, and say the Seahawks take a possible step back and the Niners sort of run away with the division, then I think the other candidates for this spot in primetime are the Steelers at the Browns, could very well be for a wild card spot, or the final wild card spot in the AFC perhaps. Could be that. If the Chargers surprise, maybe them at the Chiefs, but I doubt it. Maybe the Falcons at the Bucks. I wouldn't sleep on that being the late night Sunday night game. So if I had to predict which one of these games is the Sunday night game, I'm actually going to say I think it's going to end up being Pittsburgh at Cleveland. Because I think that those two teams are going to be in play for that last wild card spot, the 7th seed in the AFC. And I think it's more likely that Seattle takes a step back and the Steelers and the Browns bounce back than the Seahawks and the 49ers battling out again week 17 and the Browns or the Steelers not being in contention in Week 17. So I'm going to say that the Week 17 Sunday night I'm going to say it's for the last wild card spot is between the Steelers and the Browns, or maybe the winner wins, or the winner gets the 6th seed, the loser gets the 7th seed, or the winner go home scenario where the winner gets the 7th seed and the loser goes home, which I think is very, very possible. So there you have it, the schedule preview show. Not really a preview show, but it's a reaction show, I should say. And I'm probably going to look back on this after the season in terms of predicting the games that get flexed out and determine if I'm right about some of these or not. So it's always fun to look back on these games and predictions and whatnot. So hope you guys have a nice weekend, everyone.